We're tracking this breaking news story that Donald Trump told us about, the oil tanker that Donald Trump says the United States has seized off the coast of Venezuela. In the Oval Office, Donald Trump was asked for details about that, and he claimed that it was, quote, seized for a very good reason, end quote, but wouldn't reveal what that very good reason is or was. As for the oil on the tanker, Donald Trump said this, quote, well, we keep it, I guess.
It's either sloppy or incompetent or it's criminal. And I think it's gut check time again for America. And I think there's another important part of this that's happening is Trump is doing what he always does. He's stress testing the entire system. There's only, I think, 6 days left for Congress to be in session. So if they're going to have a War Powers Act vote on Venezuela, that has to happen in the next week. They're going to have a defense bill they have to pass. And he may be ramming Venezuela down their throat. Whether we're going to get questions for someone like Hegseth is also in the mix.
But what's the predicate for seizing the tanker?
I don't know. I mean, I never know what his predicate is. I mean, the thing I said to you a few weeks ago is he wants to attack Venezuela. He's made that clear, and he's building a narrative around it sloppily, inconsistently, badly in a lot of different ways. But the pieces continue to be put in place, and the pedal is to the metal. And I think we have to continue to underscore Congress hasn't authorized it. Most of the country is against it. Most of our allies are against it. But F-18s were miles off the coast of Venezuela, and he could start striking any minute. And the question is, will Congress do anything? Will they stop him? Will they slow him down? Admiral Halsey actually retires on Friday. Will we hear from him in the public now that he's not in uniform anymore? I think he will be a critical voice. But we need total transparency, and it's maybe the biggest test we've seen of the Senate and Congress in years.
Mary, let me show you what Senator Jackie Rosen said about Pete Hegseth's interest in all of this.
This is about respect for our country, respect for the rules of engagement, respect for our veterans, and especially for our active duty military. It's about respect and convention, and we need to be sure that we are doing what we need to do to be sure that America is still that trusted and respected country around the world. Secretary Hegseth doesn't have the character or demeanor. He just likes to, well, I'm just going to say it this way, he just likes to show pictures of blowing up. I got a bunch of video games, if that's what he wants to do that don't put any active duty men or women in harm's way. He wants to blow up and put pictures of it up. God bless him. But don't you dare put anybody in harm's way for your visual.
And I guess this is the most important part of the story. It's not about why he did or didn't seize the tanker. It's not even about what secret classified memo does or does not, in their minds, justify the second strike, killing two people who the administration themselves describes as, quote, distressed mariners, which meets the law of war definition of where the line is, where one doesn't strike. What about the men and women in the military who, for a million different reasons, have no voice in these debates? Is it legal? Is there any mechanism to have any oversight over what Donald Trump is doing in the region?
Well, I'm glad you focused on those men and women, because it's not Pete Hegseth himself, so far as we know, who's, actually the operator who's releasing these missiles that are killing these people and blowing these boats out of the water. It is the people underneath him, the people who are in our military, who are serving their duty. And this is not what they signed up for. I feel pretty confident that this is not what they expected that they would be doing when they entered the military at whatever rank they're in. And I think not only do these kind of operations, which cause the rest of the world to lose some respect for our military and feel distrustful of our military, not only could that have reverberations in other places where our military are operating and are relying on sort of the goodwill of the people who live there to, work together with them and not essentially attack them. It not only could have that kind of like possibility of physical harm, but there's also the possibility of exposure to liability. Now, I know the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice apparently has some legal memo out there that purports to make this all lawful, but that is not necessarily a, complete abdication of any responsibility, particularly for things that are blatantly illegal. So, there's a lot that you can do when you are a government employee or a member of the military to rely rely on a legal opinion from the Department of Justice, and for good reason, right? People ought to be able to rely on that when they take official actions to insulate them from some culpability. But when what you see is so blatantly illegal, like the idea of killing people who are clearly in distress, who are hanging onto the side of wreckage in a boat, that undermines this notion that you can just rely on a legal opinion. And so this whole series of events is putting our military in jeopardy also when it comes to their own potential liability for these killings, these really murders, in my opinion. And you know, it damages military civilian relations here at home. It impacts their families, you know, military families who live throughout the United States and elsewhere, kids that go to school, right? The public here and abroad is absorbing everything that they're seeing, and that really impacts all of these families' ability to feel like they're parts of the community. And not.
We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large, largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other people.
All right, that's some breaking news right there. The president is ramping up the pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, saying they've seized an oil tanker. Joining us, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MS Now contributor Peter Baker. Ashley Parker is still with us. Peter, this seems like a pretty significant development.
Yeah, it's an escalation, obviously. We've seen these attacks on the boats that are supposedly drug-running boats. We've seen an increase in U.S. forces in the area. We've seen the president talk about the possibility of using force in Venezuela. This seizing of an oil tanker is, one more step down that road. This is a sanctioned tanker, we're told. There are examples where the United States has seized sanctioned oil tankers in the past and other circumstances, but in the context of this particular moment, given the chest beating and the war drums being banged in terms of Venezuela, it raises the question of what's coming next.
Ashley, what is the goal of the administration in Venezuela?
So it depends who you talk to, but in general, there are a lot of people who are interested in regime change in Venezuela. And that's one of the key things. And even these strikes on these alleged narco terrorists, where some of the legal reasoning is quite dubious. When you talk to people in the administration, there's a sense that they want to make things very uncomfortable for Maduro. And their hope is that some of this will prompt regime change. But again, they're not 100% united on that.
If it's not regime change, though, Ashley, what else could it be? Is it just another example of them wanting to show these images to the American public to project a certain sense of self?
Well, there's also, it's interesting. Trump, I think, gets misunderstood a little bit as isolationist, which is not quite true. He doesn't believe in forever wars, but you have seen this term in particular talk of the Monroe Doctrine and talk of flexing American might in the Western Hemisphere in the Americas. And so Venezuela certainly fits squarely into that bucket as well.
Like endless wars, well, we get endless wars through attempts at regime change. That's how we got into Iraq for so long. We'll see if they actually follow through, whether this is just a lot of saber rattling. The president does like to be, a tough guy on the stage. He does like to sort of flex his muscles, and he may hope that intimidation wins some concessions in some fashion or another. But an actual regime change operation is the kind of thing that seems, as Ashley put it, to belie his stance against these forever wars. It was a real key part of his appeal to a lot of Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember him going after George W. Bush and the Iraq War and saying it was a mistake and campaigning on it and gaining the support of a lot of Americans because they too felt it was a mistake, and they had family members sent off to war. They were sent off to war for no good reason, or at least based on lies. So this again defies that logic.
Donald Trump is committing crimes on the high seas to distract you from problems on his own shores and, on the land in between those shores. He's just snatching up boats. Absolutely insane. Imagine if you were just on the ocean and you just saw your neighbor and you said your neighbor was doing some bad stuff. Did you have proof? I don't know. Maybe not. And you just snatched up their boat. Be like, it's my boat now. I just jumped on it with my family. We're taking your boat, sir. Obviously, you'd probably be charged with theft, kidnapping, endangerment of life, etc., 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 burglar. I don't even know the amount of charges. And imagine if any other country did this to the United States. Imagine if another country was like, well, Donald Trump violated human rights law. And he did when he illegally bombed Iran, for example. So another country, to stop a criminal regime of Donald Trump, just started seizing American boats, American oil tankers, American, companies shipping goods and services and whatnot, goods between China and the United States, and they seized an American shipping container boat. Whatever the reason, they would be up in arms. But this is what Trump is doing, and it puts American lives at risk, because what Trump has done here, and he's done it with Canada and Greenland and Panama and Europe broadly defined, threatening his allies, alienating his allies, acting like a pariah on the international stage, acting like a war criminal. He'll steal what he'll steal. He'll end lives of whoever he wants to end lives of. And he does not expect to be held to a standard that he would want other countries to be held to. And remember, this if this breaks, and it's already started, right? People have lost their lives. Boats have been destroyed. Boats have been stolen. These are acts of direct conflict. But if this breaks out, remember this. This is not about democracy. It is not. Donald Trump supports right-wing dictatorships in Latin America. This is about stealing oil. It's Iraq Redux. We were called cynical. Remember, people who were against the war 20 years ago. I was in high school. We were called cynical and conspiratorial for saying it was an oil for war. Well, Donald Trump, it's oil for war part 2.